Unmasking darkness, revealing light. Political cow, not thinking bright. Unveiling truth, vanishing night. Of every post, she does the work. Unmasking darkness, revealing light. Political cow, not thinking bright. Unveiling truth, vanishing night. Her voice cuts through, stark and raw. Shattering deception, breaking the law. Icons crumble and idols fall. She stands tall, fierce and cold. Her voice echoes like thunderous call. In the chaos, her strength unfolds. False prophets scatter, truth ascends. The world watches, mesmerized. Political cows battle never ends. In her light, dark meets its demise. Political cow, not thinking bright.
Hey everybody, what's going on this evening? See if we can get some more folks on a bit later than normal. Maybe, I don't know, a couple hours later than I want to try, well, maybe even 2.5 hours. I want to see if I can get going, usually at 10:30 Central, but way later. Just they got past me, but honestly, this news is going to be old news if we don't start covering it now. Let me get the music volume down here. Get the ominous, suspenseful music volume down low. All right. Going. Boom, boom. Nice. Okay. All right, y'all. Thanks again for joining here. As usual, a lot of interesting things going on. I just picked a couple of them that I find interesting. And to get going right off the bat here, I'll start off with something a little funny. I don't even know how I came across this article, but it's being reported by People News, who is identified by Ground News as a high factuality source. I think because a lot of it's based on reality. It's people's real lives that they're reporting on, right? So I mean, of course, it's going to have a good deal of factuality behind it. Anyway. Pull up the headline here, and somebody in New York, I don't know, this poor lady, was wandering into the subway, and when she sat down to take her seat, there was actual poop on the seat that she sat down on. Bizarre, absolutely bizarre. Well, or maybe it's not, because I mean, they have that map on San Francisco, and the way some of the cities are going, this might be a more frequent occurrence. But nonetheless, she was in rented jeans. Now, I've never heard of rented jeans in my life, so if you guys know what's going on there, let me know. I've never heard of rented jeans before. But she was in rented jeans, right? So it's going to be liable, I guess, for these jeans. And she just sits down. Nobody around her warns her. There was people on. It's not like she was alone in that particular subway car. There's people around her sitting around this thing, right? There's just kind of like a load sitting there on the seat, and I don't know how people are dealing with the smell or anything, but she just sits down really quickly, right? She's in a rush or whatever, and says that she immediately knew something was wrong because she felt, quite a bit of wetness. And then the smell came, and then she was horrified. And she started yelling at the people like, why didn't you tell me? And everyone's just shrugging their shoulders like, sorry, It just watch the accident kind of happen in front of them. Unreal. The reason this got a lot of coverage, and it just ended up on People Magazine, is there was actually a social media post. I'm going to jump over to People Magazine site. So this is the lady that had the unfortunate incident happen. Let me see if they got her social media post here. I think that is actually the seat in question. Now it's been cleaned, right? Where is her social media post? This is it. TikTok. Looking for the link to her post. Because that's how it kind of got around everywhere, is that she posted her story onto... oh, yeah, there we go. This is it. Post on TikTok. And I mean, this is how it was presented, right? It was just like this meme with all the little stories that went along with it. She had to go in an office on a Friday afternoon, return a pair of boots. Again, I've never seen this renting thing before. If anyone knows actually how that works, you rent clothing and shoes and all that kind of stuff in New York. I've never heard of this before. And there's actual like apps and stuff that you do this through. I think you have access to, high fashion and so forth. But anyway, strange concept to me. I'm not in those circles, I guess. But this was the meme that she posted. Had to go to in the office on Friday afternoon to return a pair of boots. It was warmer than anticipated. I was sweating, so forth. Right, had to return my rentals. She was dripping wet and sweat. I finally returned. She went to the 28th station to get on the W train going downtown. Now, this is not a train that she normally gets on, right? I never get on the W train. I live in Brooklyn, so it doesn't make sense for me to be on that train. But I was sweaty and annoyed and hot and wanted to treat myself to a subway ride. I guess hitting the subway in New York is a treat. I had no idea. Things were looking up. My errand was complete, and I was listening to 1989 TV and her headphones. She got on the train, hooked her arm around the pole, and sat down. Immediately knew something was wrong. She felt wet. She stood up and saw what was now spread all over her. Human feces, like wonderful. I can't even imagine, right? Threw her headphones off. She started hearing everybody on the train kind of talking to themselves. And again, who just sits there and like watches this? Not to mention, who just sits there right next to this thing? Who's sitting there next to this stuff, right? I mean, you got to be kidding me. You walk into a train car and like if you see it visually there, are you going to sit down in the seat next to it or the seat in front of it? There's people all around. I mean, it can't be that crowded. Just wait till the next car or just, walk to the next car or something. But anyway, people noticed it. And they're saying, I'm sorry. I can't believe that happened. Like, really? You watched it unfold right in front of you. That poor girl. She just like sat down right in it. You guys didn't do anything about it. Anyway, she starts yelling, why don't you tell me anything about it? And then she goes on to say that she jumped out of the train car, didn't know what to do with herself, was crying her eyes out. Luckily ran to a store, bought a new pair of leggings. They gave her, they gave them to her like pretty much for free, huge discount just because of the situation she was in. And I think they got a picture of the jeans in a bag. Oh, here we go. So this is actually a photo of that day. So she got her new pants on, and then the jeans in question were just in this bag as she was carrying them back wherever. Now, remember, they were rentals, so she did actually wash them and return them, and I guess they were accepted. I don't know. Kind of crazy, because now somebody else is probably wearing those rental jeans and off off somewhere. So, starting off with something funny there. I don't even remember how I came across that story, but what has happened and what has unfolded in these liberal left-leaning cities, New York, San Francisco, so forth. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg as to what folks have to deal with. Remember when Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis had their debate, I don't know if it was a couple of years ago now or a year and a half ago, and DeSantis actually pulled out a printout of like a Google map that showed pinpoint locations of everywhere there was human feces found in San Francisco. So, I don't know. Maybe this is just a trend. Do you just get used to something like this? I mean, you guys tell me. I would be finding a new place to live, personally. All right. So, started off with the the Blue City experience there, and then we'll run it over to Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader in the House. And he went on a few shows here recently and started talking about like how he wants to work with President Trump, how he thinks everything should be bipartisan, and there's a unification aspect coming through. And then he started to go through and started naming like, hey, we got to recognize that the cost of living is too high. People need some economic relief. They need some help. We got to fix the system for them. Started talking about all of the things that are reasons why people voted for Trump. And it makes you wonder, you pause for a second there, if they're a little more concerned with figuring out what matters to people and adjusting their platform so they can, retain power or gain more power as a party. Is that more important to them, or do they actually stand on principle behind some of these things, right? Because if their core principle was, they'll often say, trickle-down economics doesn't work. We have to, build the economy from the ground up, whatever it is, right? And I got a clip of that later too. But they'll say that kind of stuff, and at the same time, Hakeem Jeffries here, I'll just play it here. So this is him right after the election, I believe.
1 week nearly after election day.
Oh, hang on a second. Got to fix the audio here. One sec, guys. Bear with me. All right, here we go.
Votes are still being counted with the control of the House still in the balance. CBS News rates Congress is leaning Republican, which would give Republicans control of the House, the Senate, and the White House for the first time since 2017. So who better to talk right now than, there he is, Democratic House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries joins us at the table. The congressman is also the author of a new kid's book. It's called The ABCs of Democracy. Leader Jeffries, good morning. Good to have you here 1 week today. We were preparing for the election, and now a lot of people have had a lot of time to digest. So there's a lot of coulda, woulda, shoulda, what had happened was, what they needed to have done is. So what's your take on what happened last Tuesday?
Well, the American people have spoken.
Loud
And we
clear.
have an incoming president. And we've got to, as Democrats, work with the incoming administration whenever and wherever possible and strongly disagree when necessary. And that's going to be the approach that we take. And we've got to tackle some issues that clearly the American people have indicated are incredibly important to them and their lives, like lowering costs and making sure that we can improve the quality of life for everyday Americans who are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck.
But what happened? I hear what you're saying, what we have to do now.
So again, that is a really interesting way to kind of lead off the discussion, lead off the interview that's happening here. Or maybe it's not. It's a recognition that this is what drove people to vote for Trump. We need to align ourselves with it. But it's a difficult proposition now to deliver from your party standpoint, because the reason that people are having these difficulties is a direct result of actions and principles that your party said they stood behind, right? The core behind it all is modern monetary theory, where they believe that because you are the government and you have a currency, you are free to print as much as you want. That's no big deal. Debt to GDP does not matter. And the way that you control inflation is actually by increasing taxes. Those are the highlights, and they assert that increasing taxes kills demand, and that'll bring inflation down. Of course, what actually happens when you raise taxes, right? Where does that money go? It goes from individuals to the government, and then what does the government do? They're not going to just cancel it or stick it in the bank and leave it there. They're going to spend it. It's going to be applied towards other programs, and so this modern monetary theory. Oh, wow. Folks are voting yes. I got one yes vote on that. That's scary. This modern monetary theory is more or less just taking, it's not cutting off demand. It's just transferring where the demand is coming from. Individuals now into the hands of government, and they're deciding winners and losers. They're deciding where The investments get applied, not individuals, based on the market, based on opportunity, based on what people value and see what's important, right? So modern monetary theory, we've all experienced it over the last couple of years here. That's what led us into this inflationary point. It's something that's unspoken and it's out there. And this is a real thing too. A lot of times you've heard the liberals throughout the election talk about Project 2025. That was a think tank that came up with that material. There was a think tank that kind of came through, and a lot of them were Nobel laureate, economists that came up with this model. It's been out there for quite some time now, but it's actually being taken and applied by the Democrat Party. So again, debt to GDP, no big deal. They can spend to no end because you're free to print as much money as you want. You're the central government. There's no consequence for that. And inflation, you combat that by raising taxes. And of course, that doesn't kill demand, that just redirects it. It's coming from the government. So that's not an accurate way of kind of thinking about how that model would necessarily work. And then there's just problems too, because you're also assuming that our currency would continue to, be higher in value than every other country around the world. What happens when all of your input costs start to go up because of global trade? What happens then? If the euro all of a sudden outpaces the dollar in terms of strength, same with the yen, same with other currencies. What happens if that imbalance happens? You really get into a bad situation very quickly then. And then I don't even want to think about what happens if you start actually canceling your own debt. That's a bizarre scenario. But it's interesting that he has to now take a stance from the party because he is one of the party leaders. He's taking a stance and saying, hey, we recognize that people are hurting, costs are too high, we have to improve quality of life, affordability things for people. And that's what he leads in with in this discussion. Again, this was right after the election had happened.
But what happened? Because for so many people, depending on your point of view, you were either in the fetal position that night or you were doing the hula. Because we kept hearing it's going to be so close, there's no way we're going to know, it may be a couple days, be patient. What happened?
Well, America's a resilient nation, and so we're going to get through this political moment and continue to be the greatest country, in my view, in the history of the world. But we have problems that we have to solve. We've got to make sure, of course, that we fix our broken immigration system and we secure the border. Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that we lower costs and grow the middle class. And we've got to work together. There are times...
So he just coupled Trump's platform with we've got to work together, right? And I don't know when those issues that he's talking about became Democrat issues. Actually, I do know when. It was February, March timeframe when the polling data showed that the Democrats were losing, and they started taking action on the border, taking security a little bit more seriously, and they started being a little more outspoken on affordability type issues that were out there. Always quick to point to Wall Street's metrics. Stock market's good, GDP's looking good, but not looking at individual metrics as to how people and families are really doing. To campaign and engage in the political process, that time has come to an end, and we've got to figure out how we can solve problems on behalf of everyday Americans.
But speaking of those two things, the economy and immigration, do you believe that Vice President Harris should have created more of a distinction between what she was going to do up against what the Biden administration is doing?
Well, we'll have an opportunity to engage in after-action analysis, and I expect that will happen not just over the next few days, but over the next few weeks and the next few.
Remember, famously on The View, Harris said that there wasn't anything she could think of that she would have done differently from Biden's decision points.
Months. It will be required. From our perspective as House Democrats, I think we're going to have a family conversation that needs to be clear-eyed, candid, and comprehensive to figure out what happened on election night, why did it happen, and how do we improve upon the performance in order to put us in the strongest possible position to deliver for the American people moving forward.
But Congresswoman, or Congressman, I was looking at Gail. Gail
That was an interesting slip.
was making the point that the Democratic Party, America has problems that our leaders need to address, but the party clearly has messaging problems as well. You know, some of the book's ideas actually echo the.
This is always interesting, too. They talk about the party has messaging problems. It doesn't really matter to them. Do we have the right set of core beliefs? Are we acting in the interest of people by doing this? Those things don't seem to matter. It's just like, oh, we've said these things incorrectly. We didn't say it in a way that would appeal to the broadest group of people. We didn't say these things in a way that would bring us a win, right? Winning is more important than actually doing something on behalf of people.
Problems for W. First of all, the book's great. It's great.
It is fantastic.
W is working families over the well-connected. Democratic Party did really well with the well-connected, didn't do so well with working families. And some people in the Democratic family are already talking about it publicly. They're diagnosing it. Seth Moulton, one of your fellow congressmen, basically said it's woke culture and a certain kind of cultural progressivism. He says Democrats are preaching too much and not listening enough.
That hits the nail on the head. That culture has absolutely ruined the party, but it's also, I think, negatively influenced a considerable number of individuals in the country, creating these narcissistic tendencies of feeling that you are better than, that you know better than others. You know how best to spend other people's money is what it comes down to in a lot of cases. And I'll show you an example of that a little bit later.
Is he right?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of the conversations that we're going to have collectively.
He's having it right now at
Democrats.
CBS Boston. This is him talking out
Yeah,
loud.
no, listen, I understand. And, you know, there are 435 members of the House of Representatives, which means there are 435 independent contractors who, at the end of the day, are most accountable and should be to the communities that they represent. But we'll have a responsibility as House Democrats to have that conversation about how we move forward. But I do agree with the perspective. We have to put working families over the well-connected. We have to make sure that we can continue to build the greatest middle class ever seen in the history of the world. And clearly, one of the focuses that we need to spend our attention on together, collectively, not as Democrats and Republicans, but as Americans, is making sure that we can drive down the cost of living. It's too high for far too many Americans.
But
Again, hitting on that theme. But I think the gap, though, here, I don't know if he's just trying to get out in front and kind of claim an even more prominent role as being a leader in the party and maybe setting himself up for something in the future. I don't know if that's why he's making these types of assertions, getting ahead of everyone else. But, I mean, and remember, this was right after the election. We'll look at a couple things more recently, actually just today, that he went on CNN about. And it's interesting. He says the exact same stuff. They haven't come up with anything new yet, right? That's bizarre to me. But he's saying these things, I think, to get ahead of the rest of the party because he has some aspirations of, you know, being a leading force. But it's empty. Do people actually trust him or the party to bring these things forward? It's 3 years, 4 years of history now that people have as a point of reference. And so that consequence history will not go away easily. It's going to take a very long time for that to start to go away. It's going to take a lot of effort for them to shift that. And all they're focused on is the narrative. How do we communicate better? When in reality, you need to look deep down and think about how do we reset our core principles and beliefs because they're actually not acting in the best interests of individuals.
you know, we were talking in the break about how Joe Biden is the union president, working class president. So it's not that Democrats didn't have programs and results they could point to say we're helping working families, but people didn't hear it. They felt like, David Brooks had a column recently about how Democrats are great on all kinds of inequality, racial, gender inequality, and they don't seem to care at all about class inequality. There's a respect issue. No?
Well, we clearly care about making life better for everyday Americans. And it drives everything that we do.
I don't think I don't know the gentleman's name that's doing the interview there or asking the question. I don't think he realizes it, but he fundamentally hit the nail on the head with what really matters, which is social class, not any of these other things that he gave the Democrat Party credit for doing a good job in. Social class drives everything. I've said this often. If your pocketbook is not right, everything else starts to stop mattering pretty quickly. And that's the case for a lot of people right now because of what's happened over the past 4 years or 4. It's not just groceries. It's not just energy costs. And I'm not talking about just, putting gas in your car, people's heating bills, electricity. A lot of things have had a significant uptick. Property taxes, everything's gone up across the board. Insurance premiums. I mean, you could keep naming it, right? There's going to be a point where things start to fall apart. This becomes very unsustainable. When we hit that point, I don't know. It's going to start getting reflected in jobs data. It's going to start getting reflected, in household debt that's being held out there. I don't know what the breaking point is as a leading indicator, but we're not on a really good track right now.
From a policy perspective. But of course, we've got to figure out how we can better connect the policies that we've worked hard to implement under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris. Infrastructure, fixing our crumbling bridges, roads, and tunnels, creating millions of good-paying union jobs. That's putting people first. That was a policy. That actually happened. The CHIPS and Science Act, which is designed to bring domestic manufacturing jobs back home to the United States of America, because our jobs for far too long have gone overseas. That was a policy accomplishment that is designed to put working class people.
That's bizarre about the re-onshoring of roles that he's talking about. There was not really any policy during the Biden-Harris administration that supported that. A good portion of what's being proposed as tariff by Trump is to influence that investment in the United States and that move of that manufacturing base back into the United States. And we have to be honest with ourselves that that's not going to be a one-to-one exchange of jobs. That labor arbitrage that went overseas over the past many decades now, if there was a plant with 2,000 people, maybe there was a new plant with 3,000, but the labor cost was 25% of what it was before. And they got an even greater level of output because you could hire more people than you had before. That was the labor arbitrage, bringing it back. Robotics have advanced, AI has advanced to the point where that's the next level of arbitrage. So when they come back, we don't need to deal with as much labor. Everything's going to be so hyper automated. A plant with 2,000 people might come back as 200 or even significantly less than that, because it's going to be people that are maintaining the machines, not people that are actually constructing the products per se.
First, even standing up a clean energy economy, which is designed to make sure, of course, that we have clean air and clean water, but that clean energy economy creates jobs in the heartland of the United States of America. That was a policy accomplishment, but we have to better connect why we are doing these things and how it will lead to improving the quality of life of everyday Americans.
It sounds like you're still processing, but were you stunned last Tuesday night? I'm just curious. I know lessons learned and all of that, but were you?
So he just got kind of called out because he's not really offering anything new. He's just claiming the Trump positions as his own, or as being what the Democrat positions have been all this time. Bizarre move, but I really think he's trying to get out in front at this point in time. Remember, this, again, is right after the election happened.
Stunned by what happened last
Well, we knew going into the election, as Vice President Harris repeatedly stated, including at the convention, this is close, and it's going to be close.
It wasn't close.
All the way through. I think at the end of the day.
Yeah. So Gail's jumping out there pretty quick. It wasn't close, actually. By the way, this was a clear mandate. There was a clear rejection of what has happened over the past 4 years.
The popular vote will be close. I think it was, an electoral college outcome that most people on the Democratic side didn't expect. because everything broke at the presidential level
All right.
in terms of Donald Trump's direction.
Will you lay it
The
out
book is
in your
great.
book? Yes.
The book is great.
All right. So this is the setup, right? He went out there, Hakeem Jeffries talked about, right after the election, what the party needs to do, what they stand for, which oddly enough was flip-flops in alignment with where, Donald Trump has been this whole time. So let's look now at a segment from, I think her program's called The Source, Caitlin Collins on CNN. She had him on. Now, keep in mind, this is 4 weeks later, and he's got the same talking points. They don't have any new ideas at this point. So watch.
But with a razor-thin majority, of course, Johnson and his Republicans will have to also likely potentially work with Democrats. My source tonight is the House Democratic leader, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York, who is also the author, I should note, of the new book, The ABCs of Democracy, which maybe a lot of people should be reading. It's great to have you here. You just heard Speaker Johnson there talking about what this is going to look like. How do Democrats act going forward in the minority for the next 2 years when it's going to be different this time because Republicans control everything around you?
Well, from our perspective, we're going to find bipartisan common.
So hang on a second. Is he wearing the same suit and tie as what he had on 4 weeks before? I thought that was not allowed.
Ground with the incoming administration on any issue whenever and wherever possible, particularly as it relates to driving down the high cost of living for everyday Americans, which we must tackle decisively. But at the same period of time, we're prepared to push back against far-right extremism whenever necessary, protect Social Security, protect Medicare, protect the Affordable Care Act, protect the progress that we've made on the climate crisis, and certainly protect a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions.
But you do feel there could potentially be some areas where there's bipartisanship with you and the Trump White House.
Well, that's possible, certainly, because that, to the extent that there is a mandate that comes out of this election, particularly in an evenly divided House of Representatives, where my Republican colleagues will have just a small majority, smallest majority since 1931 in the United States Congress. By necessity, we have to try to find ways to work together if we truly are going to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers.
Yeah, what went through your head when you were seeing Trump pick House Republicans to go in his administration, 3 of them because...
Yeah, that was an interesting move, though, getting those House Republicans in. You'd think you're kind of tightening up what was already a slim majority. Like, why would you start to erode that even further? For me, it speaks to Trump just wants the right people in those positions, in those jobs, and it doesn't really matter what it would take to kind of get there, even if it meant losing, a little bit more wiggle room, or not wiggle room, a little bit more breathing room they had with the number of folks that they had in Congress on the Republican side of things. It was more important to make sure that these federal agencies were being watched over by the right people. And so again, you talk about what Jeffries is saying here, talking about making sure that there's an affordability issue addressed for individuals. These were not Democrat positions before, right? They're kind of altering their worldview. They're not really standing on any principle at this point because you've completely, done a 180 on some of these things. You've flip-flopped. I mean, famously, now Harris flip-flopped on a number of things, fracking being one of them during the election. And so you look at what Trump's doing, and he's acting on principle, saying like, no, you know what? I'm not going to do the political move and say we can't pick anybody out of the House to take on some of these cabinet positions. I just want the best people to be put in these roles for and they can set us up for success as a country. And if it costs me a couple of individuals in the House, so be it. Right? That's a more principled position to take. Right? I want the right people in those jobs versus let me just flip-flop on the issues and see if we can kind of muster up some new support.
because once those numbers are fully done, the majority is going to be 217, 215. It's going to be quite small for Mike Johnson.
What was going through my head? 3 words: keep it going. I mean, at the end of the day, during the first 100 days of the Trump administration, as you indicated,
Again, the keep it going. Anything to win, anything to get more power. Doesn't matter. There's no principle behind what he's doing, what he says, what he stands for. It's just about retaining or gaining power, and it's about, keeping people locked into the party.
217 to 215, meaning my Republican colleagues can't lose a single vote in order to get anything done, which is why, by necessity, we should embrace bipartisanship to solve problems for everyday Americans. Also, Caitlin, it's important to understand, the last time Donald Trump took office in January of 2017, he had 241 Republicans in the House of Representatives and only 194 Democrats. So we're in a very different situation in terms of making progress in a bipartisan way, exercising common sense to find common ground, but pushing back against Republican extremism whenever necessary.
Yeah, and CNN reported, on approaching Trump, because Trump is approaching Washington so differently this time. He knows.
So again, the language is important here. I want to be bipartisan, but they're extremists, so we got to push back on them. I don't see how that's really a unifying message.
How Washington works much more than he did when he entered office in 2017. And we reported that you and your leadership team are talking about how to avoid a repeat of that time when some felt that Democrats, chased Donald Trump every hour while not delivering their own message. Is that something you're seeking to avoid this time around?
Well, under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi, of course, we were successful in stopping the repeal of the Affordable Care Act in 2017 into 2018, and then taking back control of the United States House of Representatives. We needed to win 24 seats in 2018. That midterm election, we won 40. And so there are lessons that we can draw successfully from what took place then, both on the governmental side to stop bad things from happening in defense of the American people, and on the non-governmental side. But of course, we have to adjust to the moment that we're in right now. And in my view, everyday Americans are correct that the cost of living is too high, grocery prices too high, gas prices too high, cost of childcare too high, housing costs too high. And as
So here's the sad thing with that. While those prices are high, they're not coming down. There may be some cyclical things or some commodity-based things that, as supply levels change, so forth, may be adjusted downward, but there is no restoration of the way price structures were, what price structures were 4 years ago, before Biden started the massive printing operation. That's just not going to be the case. They often claim victory, saying that they've brought down inflation. The only thing that's really been brought down is how quickly prices are going up. So they were going up at 9% per year. Now they're just going up at, say, 3% a year, right? They're still going up. They're just not going up as quickly. And so that's a compounding effect over time, because these are percentages and rates of increase. What he's not offering up is, how they're going to help folks. He's just talking about prices, and that's where Harris would start talking about we need to cap prices and set prices and so forth, and that's a recipe for disaster. So what can you do from a systemic standpoint to help with wage growth, to encourage economic development, to create more labor demand, right? These types of things that'll support increase in wages of workers so that they can kind of catch up with things. And I don't know all the right things that can be done, but you would want to hear somebody speak towards something more systemic, something that they're working towards that would last, right? It's not like a temporary fix, like we're going to fix the price of groceries for the next year. You're welcome, which again just happens to line up with in the next major election cycle or whatever when they put these time frames on things.
Democrats, we're going to work as hard as we can to lower costs, and we hope we can find some partners in the incoming administration.
Well, and speaking of partnership, I mean, we saw Democrats work with Republicans in the last Congress on multiple occasions, whether it was to keep the government funded, to help not avoid, defaulting on the debt, to helping Mike Johnson keep his job at times. With Donald Trump in the White House and Republicans in control of the Senate, do you envision extending any more lifelines to Republicans like that this time around?
Well, we're prepared to get things done to solve problems for hardworking American taxpayers, but that does remain to be seen in terms of the posture that is adopted by my Republican colleagues. The notion that there's some big, massive, sweeping mandate for far-right extremism or for Republicans to jam tax cuts down the throats of the American people that benefit the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, that's non-existent.
All right, so there he's hitting on a key factor, right? Let's keep those tax cuts in mind that he's talking about, because they'll often talk about... All right, sorry, back. They'll often talk about trickle-down economics, but what they leave out is what's happening in reality. Their proposal is Robin Hood economics, which is a disaster in itself, right? Repossessing funds from folks, and then what do you do when you run out of money? I talk about this example every live stream. I feel like if you took, there's 1,000 billionaire families in the United States, about that much. And if you took all of their assets, the government seized all of their assets, brought them all to a net worth of zero, you would not be able to run the government for more than a half a year, or it would be a partial year that you would be able to run the government for. So again, what do you do when you run out of other people's money? They're not thinking of things systemically. These are just short-term, quick fixes that that make people feel like something has been done from like a point of retribution. That's not the mindset that we need. That's not productive long-term. It's not helpful to anybody long-term. So the thinking is not quite there. He's talking about, we need to come together and partner. But he is absolutely the wrong person to be in this role from the Democrat Party side of things. Because again, let's take a look a few years back at how he was talking about Trump, the language he was using.
On Martin Luther King Day, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries made controversial comments about President Trump.
We have a hater in the White House, the birther in chief, the grand wizard of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. One of the things that we've learned is that while Jim Crow may be dead, he's still got some nieces and nephews that are alive and well.
Joining us now is the House Democratic Caucus Chair, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York, to talk about this and so much more. Congressman, thank you very much for being here this morning. Do you regret going that far in your comments on Monday?
Not at all. Let me say three things. First of all, our top priority has to continue to be to reopen the government in this reckless Trump shutdown, put Americans back to work, and then have a mature conversation about border security. Second, we as House Democrats are going to continue to focus on lowering health care costs, infrastructure, cleaning up corruption.
So again, painting as extremism. He said that he is not apologetic about the remarks that he made. You heard him, calling, as it says on the screen there, calling Trump the Grand Wizard of 1600 Pennsylvania, which I hope everybody knows that's the address for the White House. But these are some really inflammatory, inappropriate lines of, discussion and insults that he's putting out there that now, again, this was 4 years ago. You saw him earlier on the CBS morning show. The CNN clip was from earlier on Tuesday. His messaging overall since the election has not changed. He's claiming that their position has always been what the Republican Party's position is on economic issues. Bizarre, right? And he's completely unapologetic and does not recognize the divisive comments he's made in the past. And now he's expecting Republicans to come to the table and work with him. Honestly, the Democrats need somebody new. I mean, you're better off bringing AOC to the forefront because she has not made, these types of scenes. I mean, she's made other scenes, right? But she's somebody new to bring into the mix. They're probably better off, switching who they have, kind of speaking on behalf of everybody that's in the House. I don't think he should be the minority leader in the House of Representatives any longer for the Democrats, and that's speaking just from a strategic standpoint. There's just too much baggage. So clearly this comment here, not helpful to his case of wanting to partner and work with Republicans. And there's quite a few of them out there. Here's another example.
Well, the American people should be terrified by the prospect that the leading candidate for the Republican Party is the twice impeached former President of the United States who's under multiple indictments and is threatening to turn America's democracy into a dictatorship solely to serve his own personal interests, not the interests of the American people. That is a prospect that should terrify everyone.
Yeah, I mean, is that really helping? Is that really kind of building bridges, bridging the gap, showing Republican leadership that you're willing to work with them? I mean, clearly, he's just saying whatever it takes to get votes, to get support from the public, if he can get any at this point. I think the party's in complete disarray and demise at this point, especially if this is who you have leading the message for members of the House of Representatives for the party. So that's not going to work out well for them, right? Since the election, his messaging and talking points have not evolved beyond trying to pretend like they've had the same position, the same positions that Trump brought into the election process, or if they're trying to, I guess at some point, claim that the Trump administration has actually taken the positions that they've held the whole time. There's a lack of integrity. There's a lack of, creativity, honestly, in taking those roles. And then on top of that, the baggage of all these remarks that he's made over time about Trump, bringing identity politics into the mix, and quite a few other things. It's just not, he's just not the right person for them. Of course, I say, for my own selfish reasons, hey, keep talking, stay up there. You can be the leading voice. Works for me because I know it's not going to be helpful to the party, the Democrat Party, long term. All right, so interestingly, Biden made remarks today. I'm short on time, so I'm just going to kind of talk through. He walked through his legacy from an economic standpoint, right? And he said that, quite a bit about being pro-union, creating a lot of union jobs. The only way to have a robust economy is to create more union jobs, right? You could see that's, he gave remarks on what they're terming his middle-class, bottoms-up economics playbook. Again, it's truly Robin Hood economics, what they propose. They haven't executed it exactly well, because, Robin Hood, of course, took from the rich and gave to the poor. He did not do that. Instead, he printed money, which impacted the poor in the worst way. He took money from the poor and gave less back to them through all the inflationary money printing that he did. So it's a really bizarre dynamic that I don't even think he or any of the other Democrats quite understand or grasp. And then, of course, Karine came on live and she did her normal spin. You got to give her credit. She spins whatever Biden says or does into like as though he's creating some sort of masterpiece. And if folks were only listening to what she said, you would think that everything in the world is great and he's the best president ever. But watch some of her remarks here.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Foggy day, foggy day. So this afternoon, President Biden delivered a major address on his economic legacy. After decades of trickle-down economics, President Biden has written a new playbook that's growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. His administration has delivered the strongest recovery in the world and laid a strong foundation for years to come by investing in America, empowering workers and unions, lowering costs, and supporting small businesses. Over the last 4 years, we have made remarkable progress, and the results speak for themselves. Over 60 million jobs created, the lowest average unemployment rate of any administration in 50 years, inflation down faster than almost any other advanced economy, and incomes up almost $4,000. The list goes on. As you heard the president say, we face an inflection point.
All right, so she goes on and kind of twists some numbers, right? I'll show you an example here. That $4,000 that they claim that everybody's up, they were actually looking to undo that by not renewing the Trump tax cuts, claiming that we have, bounced back from inflation much more robust and much more quickly than other countries. While that may be true, everything is relative, right? So we are not necessarily in that scenario the best. It'll sound pessimistic, but we are the least worst out of all the other investment vehicles and opportunities out there. We still experienced significant inflation and it impacted people, but we are, on a relative basis, not as bad as many other countries are. And so I'm hopeful you guys can see this. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. They were not going to renew the tax cuts. Okay. And so, this is the example that I always give. Married couple, 2 kids, they make $30,000 a year, on the low end of the scale of things, right? They wanted to expire the Trump tax cuts. So these are data points from what the tax structure looked like, 2016 and before, which was before Trump was in office, before his tax cuts were implemented. So this is basically somebody, again, $30,000 a year household income, married couple, 2 kids, right? The standard deduction they could take at that point, just under $13,000. You had about $17,000 of tax liability, taxable income that was out there that would get taxed at about 10%. You had an amount here that was for the child tax credit, $1,000 per kid, more or less. And then you just do some math, right? There was a limit as to how much of that child tax credit, based on each individual child, you can get back as an actual refundable credit to you. You couldn't just get $2,000 outright if you didn't owe anything, right? The deductible aspect kicked in first, and then there was a refundable credit that would go to people. But with this, setup, again, married, 2 kids, you look at the impact of standard deduction, the tax rate, as well as child tax credit, they would end up with $260 as their return, right? And keep in mind, this whole time they're saying Trump cut taxes for the billionaires. He only did these tax cuts for the wealthy. But this is, towards the bottom end of things, that $30,000 and having a family of 4 that you're taking care of. Here's the structure. Here's how it breaks down under Trump's current plan, right? That has persisted, that we need to renew desperately. Otherwise, this is going to impact the low end much worse than it will anybody else, right? So again, $30,000, right? The standard deduction right now is $29,000, $29,200. Almost all of your income is not liable for tax. Only $800 is taxable income for somebody that's making $30,000 a year, married, has 2 kids, right? So your taxes that you owe are $80, literally, from federal income tax standpoint. I'm not counting, I know states have their own taxes, so forth, but just look at the federal income tax. Trump actually doubled the child tax credit to $2,000 instead of $1,000, right? And $1,700 of that could be refunded to you, right? Because again, it starts off as a deductible or a deduction, and then it's up to $1,700 of that can actually be refunded to you if there is a surplus on that side. So based on that calculation, this exact same family going from the Obama liberal tax structure now coming over to Trump's plan, right? And they are getting $3,300 in a tax return. So a little over 10% of their household income they're getting as a credit back from the government to help them sustain their livelihood, so forth, right? That's massive, right? That is absolutely massive. And as you kind of go up from 30,000, you know, there's earned income credit. There's other things that could come in play. I just did a very simple example because, you know, the tax rate, child tax credit, the standard deduction, just having those three variables in play, it's very simple to follow. Yeah, so hey Yoda, what's going on? Yeah, so the 260 again, it's crazy, right? And so this is what people are looking at, and this is what's ignored when the people talk about Trump tax cuts only benefiting the wealthy. It disproportionately helped the lower end with regard to the impact to their, you know, livelihood. All of a sudden, you had a massive amount of money that was credited back to you, and probably rightfully so, if you got, you know, two kids that you're trying to look after. So I've got this calc published, and you know, you can reference the IRS's website if you want to go see where this data came from. It's straight from the IRS. This is on PoliticalCow.com. It's just part of my show notes for today. You could go there and take a look at it as a point of reference. Again, I tried to keep it super simple, just three variables, standard deduction, which is probably the biggest piece to this, as well as the doubling of the child tax credit. You know, the tax rate, 10%, that $80, like not too big of a deal. Because look, the tax rate here is 10% also, but $1,740 versus $80, the reason you have that is the brilliance of increasing that standard deduction, which did negatively affect folks that were higher income, because increasing the standard deduction, they had to offset it somewhere, and so they offset it by capping the amount of property tax people could deduct off of their taxes. And that was capped at $10,000, which basically means if you have a home that's valued in excess of $1 million and the average property tax rate is about 1% around the country, that's where, you know, on average, folks around the country started to, you know, have their taxes not be able to, you know, deduct the surplus of whatever the tax amount was in there, if their homes were greater than $1 million, right? So again, two different scenarios of, you know, where people are at from a socioeconomic standpoint. The lower end, massive benefit. And the Democrats were willing to let that go away. They knew about this. They clearly know about this. But in their eyes, because the tax code had Trump's name on it, they were willing to throw it away. And the sad part is that people were very close to, unfortunately, being out $3,300 a month, or excuse me, not a month. Wow, a year in terms of a tax refund. So anyway, again, this is published on PoliticalCow.com. You can go take a look at it. Probably talk through it a little bit more in future live streams. But in that same vein, right, we've been talking about foreign aid being a big issue as far as that going out there. You know, do you prioritize citizens in your country? Do you prioritize, again, foreign aid? Biden renewed a $10 billion waiver to send additional funds to Iran just before Trump's about to take office. That one's a real head scratcher. Why he allowed for that waiver to begin with is bizarre, because that may have been and influence in a lot of the instability that we have right now out in the world. I won't go into details on that at this point. That's a whole other conversation. But on top of that, continuing to extend that, are you putting things into play to set up even more instability for Trump when he takes office? I mean, of course, Trump can immediately, day one, fix that, but they've effectively released millions upon millions of dollars into the hands of Iran, who, again, was taking, military action against, our allies in the Middle East. Here, let me play this clip real quick.
Meanwhile, the assault's coming just a month after President Biden signed off on renewing a waiver for Tehran, allowing the Ayatollah to continue to have access to $10 billion in frozen funds.
So again, this is not just something that's reported on, far right-wing conspiracy type publications. This hit the mainstream media, right? I know this is a clip from Fox, but this is mainstream media news now. That waiver has been extended. Why he keeps doing that, I think it's clear. It's politics, which to me is pretty disgusting stuff. He's extended this waiver to make create international challenges for Trump to have to deal with. He's rescinded, he being Biden, rescinded the border security measures that he implemented earlier in the year, which he only implemented because the border became a big issue for the government. When does the current tax plan expire? End of 25. 25 would be the last year that the current tax structure would be in place. And so starting 2026, it would fall back onto what they were under Obama. I can't wait for him to get back in. My cryptocurrency was down by 90% in this administration since Trump won. It's going back up. Yeah, and it's multiple reasons, right, for that. A good part of it was Gary Gensler and the SEC, really attacking crypto. There was a level of uncertainty, and I appreciate the comments, y'all. There's a level of uncertainty as to where crypto could not go, what it meant for individuals. Institutions finally did push through, and we did get those ETFs into place, which that unlocked a lot of new capital to flow into crypto. But it also unlocked a lot of opportunity for folks to kind of incorporate some of that into their 401k to get that hyper growth as well. But of course, we've got a fragile economy kind of going forward. Why does it fall back to the Obama plan? That was just the last tax structure we had in place. Trump, again, the bizarre thing is that the Republicans that were in office in Congress during Trump's initial term, remember, a lot of them were not for Trump, right? They were establishment Republicans that did not like what Trump was doing to the party. Many of them, like Paul Ryan, for instance, are not in Congress any longer, right? They've been kind of taken, the people have either made it clear that they don't want them to run for office again, like was in Paul Ryan's case. He just kind of retired as speaker, or they've been voted out altogether. And so what they did, unfortunately, was come to an agreement with the Democrats that they would put a time limit on these tax breaks, or the tax plan that was put on there. Why they agreed to that, I don't know, because they controlled the Congress, they controlled the Senate and the presidency at that time. They were just not fully working with Trump, and that's the sad part. They sabotaged it to where there is kind of a ticking timer effect on these tax cuts. And so if you hear talk about what are Trump's priorities coming into the new year, once he does, once he is inaugurated, the number one thing is tax cuts. They need to extend those. They need to reaffirm them ASAP, if not further them even more so than they are now. You hear like Jeff Bezos and other folks, the way of getting out of the debt that the country's in is through growth. And one major enabler for growth is, the tax structure and helping, people kind of manage inflation through that mechanism. That's another, relief valve for folks, in addition to coupling that with some wage growth. Anyway, there's a lot of things that will be beneficial towards. And again, as you just saw here, the structure that was put in place, it's not just the percentages, right, that folks should need to focus in on. That standard deduction is massive. It really reduced the burden on the lowest end. Like the example of the family making $30,000 a year, the household with 2 kids, it eliminated all their taxes. They were getting a pretty big credit going back to them, right, or pretty big refund going back to them. And again, coupled with the $10 billion that's being released, Biden did that. He's rescinded the border security measures that were implemented just for the election, so that they can say they're taking it seriously and doing something about it. Why are they undoing all these good things? It's all politics at this point. Completely a political move, making it difficult for Trump to be able to, really achieve his full ambition, or really look like he's done something positive for the country. I mean, that's really sad. And then you heard it in Hakeem Jeffries' commentary as well. There is no principle that they're standing on behind this. And by principle, it's like, I believe in open markets, and I believe, in capitalism, right? Let me just say that. That's kind of a very generic and open-ended statement, but there's a certain set of principles that you operate under, right? I believe in free speech. As Hakeem Jeffries was just kind of outlining there, he just wants to kind of shift the party position towards whatever's popular, so they can kind of bring in as many votes as they reasonably can. It's not working for them right now because they have no credibility with how the last 4 years have gone, especially with economic issues, inflation being the biggest one. They don't have any credibility, so everybody kind of sees through it. The danger is that over time, right, in politics, memories are short-lived, because clearly people aren't remembering all the things that he said about Trump, like I showed a little bit earlier. He's just not the person that you would want out there. He's not going to be someone that's trying to, kind of make deals and come to a compromise or anything at all. So that's the sad part of what's going on right now. We've got another, month to go, just about, maybe 5 weeks altogether until the inauguration happens. But day by day, and each of those 5 weeks, the Biden administration, the Democrats, are taking actions to put impediments in front of Trump from accomplishing any of these objectives. Another example of those impediments is the selection of a lot of judges by the Senate, the approval that it's going through. Why Republicans are allowing that, I have no idea, because they still have a filibuster that they can, put in play and end any of the proceedings that they're trying to get these judges confirmed. And that's going to impact a lot of things, right? You see Elon Musk, the compensation plan that he set up for himself with Tesla had some crazy metrics that he had to hit. It had to be a multi-trillion-dollar company, had to hit certain levels of revenue, certain levels of car production, which seemed unfathomable at the time when that arrangement was signed. And he took no salary at all. He took no money. This was the compensation plan. If I hit these crazy metrics, then I get, this much stock, which, I think the payout was in the $50 billion range. And he hit it. He made the company hit those targets. And yet these judges that have been appointed by the liberals are telling him that, nope, sorry, that's not going to happen. And I don't think that there's proper legal reasoning behind it. It's clearly out of retribution that these things are happening. And that's where I think we go astray, and it's not a position the country needs to be in. So just as, and as y'all are mentioning, the rhinos, just as the rhinos, a good portion of them were forced out, we still have some in there, right? Mitch McConnell needs to, there's a lot of reasons Mitch needs to retire. I won't get on him too much. It's kind of a sad story going on there. But we still have Republicans that need to get moved out of their positions of power and perhaps replaced with somebody that has some of this newer thinking, this newer kind of Trump model of what the Republican Party should be. The Democrats have the same reckoning that needs to happen. They need to get these folks that were, as was mentioned earlier, the woke ideology. They need to get those elements out of their party if they really stand to, if they want to actually make a difference in people's lives. That's been the biggest distraction that's unfolded for us over the past decade, at least. I mean, I think that's the earliest I remember a lot of this stuff starting to get brought up through Twitter at the time and, other social media. But tall order for them, because I still don't think they have any credibility. And it continues to erode to the point where I feel like if the election was to happen all over again today, Trump would get an even larger majority. I mean, it's just keeps getting worse for them. And then you have Biden going out there talking about his legacy, talking about how he made probably the biggest contribution to the United States since George Washington, right? Karine always helps him out with that stuff too. But anyway, that's all I got for tonight. I appreciate you guys hearing my brain dump. But it's fascinating to me. Every day we have something new that's coming into play constantly. I'm going to try and get online a little bit earlier. So I'm realizing that if it's post-midnight, a lot of the folks that jump on here are more West Coast time zone. I don't really capture the East or Central time zone, so I'm missing my core demographic. But anyway, I appreciate you guys. Try to be back online, and we'll kind of maybe go into a little bit more detail on some of this stuff tomorrow again. But I will leave you again, as usual, with the theme song. So on your way out, hey, like and subscribe. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.